afternoon. Good afternoon. Miami-Dade College is delighted to host the 32nd Miami Book Fair, and we're thrilled that you came out, and we are also thrilled to see the sun. Let's give the sun a round of applause today. First, we'd like to thank all of our sponsors, our generous sponsors who helped make today possible. We also want to acknowledge our friends of the book fair. Do we have any friends to be acknowledged? Thank you. Thank you for your continued support. And we invite all of you to become part of our circle of friends by connecting with us after the program. Please, if you have not already, to turn off your cell phone or any other gadget that may vibrate or distract us in any way. We'd also invite you to enjoy the program, and I'd like to welcome Professor Campbell McGrath, who teaches creative writing at FIU, who will be our moderator and will introduce the presenters. Please join me in welcoming Professor McGrath.
Thanks so much. Thank you. It's an honor to be here today to introduce not one, but two poets laureate. Juan Felipe Herrera, the current occupant of the post, and Kay Ryan, who served as Poet Laureate from 2008 to 2010. Over the last dozen years or so, the position of Poet Laureate has become ever more visible and prominent, helping poetry expand its narrow toehold in American cultural life. And I don't think it's any accident that this increase in relevance has coincided with a long-awaited expansion of the position's diversity. I don't just mean diversity in its common social aspects of gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, and even language, but more to the point, diversity of poetics. Not that long ago, the Poet Laureate was pretty much guaranteed to be a boring old white guy in a blue blazer. And he was pretty much guaranteed to write poetry in a manner approved by the editors of the Norton Anthology. Thankfully, we are in no such danger today. Certainly, it's true that Kay Ryan's sly, slender poems owe much to the model of Emily Dickinson, while Juan Felipe Herrera's vast, wide-ranging body of work belongs to the lineage of Walt Whitman. But these two laureates share a gift for poetry that is engaging, entertaining, populist, and subversive. Neither of them emerge from the canonical tradition. Neither of them employ stultifying academic jargon. Neither of them traffic in high-blown cloetic cliches or the dreary, lifeless, samey language of literary discourse. Neither of them is a boring old white guy in a blue blazer. They are writers who seize control of the material of language, drape it across the body of the world, and tailor it to their own completely original purposes. Let me tell you about how we're going to run the show today. Kay Ryan is going to come up and read for 20 minutes, and then Juan Felipe Herrera will do the same. I won't come back up in the middle to get in the way. Juan will just follow Kay. And after that, we'll sit here on stage until they kick us out at 4:30 and get questions from you guys and let the poet laureates respond to them. So now I'll read just a real quick thumbnail introduction of each of the poets. Kay Ryan, who will read first, is the author of 9 books of poetry, including her latest, just out, Erratic Facts, and her volume of new and selected poems, The Best of It, for which she received the Pulitzer Prize in 2011. Actually, wait, let me back it up. I should introduce Juan Felipe first so that my introduction of Kay Ryan leads directly into Kay Ryan. Juan Felipe Herrera is a lifelong Californian, the child of Chicano farm workers in the San Joaquin Valley. He's lived all across the state in a life dedicated to literature, teaching, activism, and the promulgation of Mexican-American culture at every level. He has won awards for his children's books, the latest of which, Portraits of Hispanic-American Heroes, has just been published, and received the National Book Critics Circle Award for Poetry in 2008 for his new and selected poems, Half the World in Light. His dozen books of poetry belong as much to the tradition of modernism as they do to the spoken word, as much to the 20th century as to the 21st century, and have been described by the New York Times as wildly inventive and always unpredictable, which may, in fact, be an understatement. Kay Ryan, who will read first, is the author of 9 books of poetry and Erratic Facts, her newest, and her Pulitzer Prize-winning volume, The Best of It. Her poems have been compared to the work of George Herbert and Marianne Moore, a rare doubleheader, to Cornell boxes and postmodern word puzzles, and also to freshly made cocktails. She has received fellowships from the MacArthur and Guggenheim Foundations and a National Humanities Medal from President Obama in 2013. A lifelong Californian, like Juan Felipe Herrera, she taught for many years at a community college, so is particularly happy to be here at Miami-Dade College. Let's please welcome Kay Ryan and Juan Felipe Herrera.
Thank you, Campbell. That was really nice. I'm so glad to not be an old white man. It's, you know, and it's hard enough being an old white woman, you know. Well, somebody's got to do it. It is delightful to be at a community college. And such a grand one as this. I'm very happy to read here. I thought, you know, at my hotel there was some really good Cuban music last night, and I thought, oh, I had to let music influence my reading a little bit. And so I'm going to start with a poem called Monk Style. And it has an epigraph from something I heard on NPR. This biographer of Thelonious Monk said, in practice, it took 45 minutes to get his stride. It was hard for Monk to play Monk. I loved that and wrote this. It may be that Monk is always playing Monk, but down the hall, there are long corridors, as in a school. Monk must approach himself, join himself at the bench, and sit a while, then slip his hands into his hands, Monk style. I take great consolation in that. I thought I'd follow that with a poem called An Instrument with Keys. Stick with the piano imagery, although in this case what I'm really talking about is memory. I have an extremely peculiar memory, and I've written a lot of poems about memory, although I don't remember it. So I always, you know, start afresh. So this is called An Instrument with Keys. As though memory were not a history, but an instrument with keys, on which no C would stay played without re-hitting C. As though memory were a large orchestra without a repertoire till it began, whereupon it remembered all of Chopin. You don't want to clap every time, because there's going to be a time when you don't want to clap, and then you're going to, you know, be torn about, will I clap? Am I a hypocritical clapper or not? So I think you should just not do it, nice as it is. Musical chairs. You see, I'm sticking with this. There's a little Martha Stewart in me that likes little room group, you know, work here. Musical chairs. This is. I was thinking, how did I get on this line of thought? And I think what it came from was thinking about the thrill of removal, about when things are taken away, and the kind of exhilaration that produces. So this is called Musical Chairs, of course, an example of removal. Only the one is musical, actually. The others are ordinary, mostly from the kitchen. Not a peep of music out of them as they are taken from rotation. Mum chairs, tuneless racks, dumb sticks, next to the escalating operatic ravishments of banishment, sung to the children by the one chair absent. I'd hate to have to be severe with you. This is called Brief Real Things, and it has an epigraph which I think is hilarious from, oh no, this isn't the one that has the epigraph I think is hilarious. This has an epigraph that I think is touching. This is from a biography of Lawrence Stern, and the biographer says, "He did not live in conventional order from day to day, but grew strong or weak like the wind." A thrilling thought. So this is called Brief Real Things. Creatures whose habits match nothing we understand are untrackable by our most implacable trackers of air, sea, and land. Now that's a ridiculous thing to say, is it not? Untrackable by our most implacable trackers. I'm shameless. I am entirely shameless. Creatures whose habits match nothing we understand are untrackable by our most implacable trackers of air, sea, and land. Oh, I forgot to tell you, there will be moments at which things will be in italics. You are at the disadvantage of hearing poems rather than reading them. And so when I come to something in italics, I'll tilt my head, okay? And you'll know that I'm reading it kind of sideways, okay? But I am going to have to start again. Creatures whose habits match nothing we understand are untrackable by our most implacable trackers of air, sea, and land, as though conjured by conditions, as though conditions fretted something to existence, as though larger arrangements, and the trackers regret this, produced brief real things in real places. Now, I so distracted you that I have to read it again because you have no idea what you just heard, right? Okay, all right. But I'll go faster this time. Okay. Creatures whose habits match nothing we understand are untrackable by our most implacable trackers of air, sea, and land, as though conjured by conditions, as though constellations fretted something to existence, as though larger arrangements, and the trackers regret this, produced brief, real things in real places. You think if you clap, I won't read it again, right? Yeah. Well, it worked. Okay, this is called Homage to Joseph Brodsky, a writer, great poet, but I've never really been able to read his poems because they're actually in Russian. And their translations are somewhat baffling to me. But I adore his essays, and some of you may know his beautiful books of essays. They're just absolutely thrilling. So anyhow, homage to Joseph Brodsky. One need not smoke to inhale. I think that's very funny itself. One need not smoke to inhale. The air in bars holds its load of tars in stale suspension. Also jails. Jails are a prison for the person who abhors smoke. Now, I hate to have to point all these things out to you, but it's also very funny to say that a jail is a prison, don't you think? You know? I think. I'm trying to suggest to you that there are private amusements in here that I would like to make public if possible. One need not smoke to inhale. The air in bars holds its load of tars in stale suspension. Also jails. Jails are a prison for the person who abhors smoke. But happily, gorgeous thought also hangs around like that. You can walk through a mist of Brodsky and contact exist. I don't have many dog poems. Not something I generally have to apologize for, but one time I was asked to substitute for Mary Oliver in Colorado. It was a great big reading, and she just published a a book of exclusively of dog poems, and I thought, oh, I'll have to try to scrape some dog poems together here. People were disappointed that it was me and not Mary. Of course, they were Mary enthusiasts, but I did read this poem, and most of my dog poems kind of use them in experimental ways or something, not so nice. But this one's pretty doggy. This is called Fool's Errands. A thing cannot be delivered enough times. This is the rule of dogs, for whom there are no fool's errands. To loop out and come back is good all alone. It's gravy to carry a ball or a bone. Now, a little equal time for cats. This goes back to my desert heritage in Central Valley. Juan and I have that in common. We both come from the Central Valley of California, although we turned out very differently. This is called The Paw of a Cat, and it's describing the movement of water. The first trickle of water down a dry ditch stretches like the paw of a cat, slightly tucked at the front, unambitious about auguring wet. It may sink later, but it hasn't yet. Have you seen water do that? It really does do that. Also, I think it's quite cat-like. One of the things I like in this poem is the word auguring. Unambitious about auguring wet, because auguring, of course, means foretelling or predicting, but it also gives you the sense of an auger, a pointed, sharp object, which could be related to a cat's claw. I thought I would read this poem, even though I shouldn't. It's called Venice, and it reveals too much about me. And it's ammunition for certain people, but it sort of shows my unclubbability and my general aversion to stimulation. And think about Venice and all the stimulation there. And then think about Miami and think about how I'm feeling. Okay, all right, Venice. There is a category of person eased by constraint, soothed when things cease. It is the assault of abundance from which they seek release. The gorgeous intensities of Venice would work best for these people at a distance. Sitting, for example, in a departing train car, feeling the menace settle. I want to read this one because I love the epigraph. This is an epigraph from Montaigne. And Montaigne said, "Let the poet's voice lose all its measure and joints. Its character will not be changed by this. Even the fragments will be beautiful." I hope he's right. So this is called Dragon's Teeth, and when probably most of you know, but there's a Greek myth in which a dragon was killed by a hero, and the teeth of the dragon, when sown in the ground, produced soldiers. It's really a very nice thing, in a way, if they're your soldiers. So this is called Dragon's Teeth. A small wallet of dragon's teeth is so potent that one wonders why forces are raised any other way. The sower has a crop of soldiers in under a day. Nonetheless, interest in packets of these pointed seeds stays unaccountably low across the many fields where they would grow. Here's something I learned from Wikipedia. The main difficulty of water wheels was their inseparability from water, says Wikipedia. So this is the main difficulty of water wheels. There are machines of great generative power that can only work locally for one reason or another. The great fixed wheels moved by water cannot be moved from water. It hurts to think of anything wrenched out of where it works. But not just for the work. Those buckets drenching the river, all the ornaments of torque. This poem is called My Kingdom for a Horse. You can think of the king, I guess in the field of battle, really needing a horse. Okay, My Kingdom for a Horse. Your kingdom has already grown abstract. No one with an actual kingdom suggests a trade like that. It can, of course, have been so rapid that you still don't know. We have to hope your voice will prove the final property to go. Of the ancestral timber, the last redoubt, still ringing of your great estates, the lowliest page of any one of which would race to get a horse to get you out. I ran into somebody before this reading, and she mentioned this poem, and so I'm changing my reading to read this. This is called Eggs. It's very short. Eggs, and then I'll read one more. Be done. We turn out as tippy as eggs. Legs are an illusion. We are held as in a carton if someone loves us. It's a pity only loss proves this. Something I get a kick out of in this is and I don't know if I knew it when I wrote it, but I noticed it. I just don't know. But tippy and pity are the same, they're the reversed sounds. Which gives me a big kick. I'll read it again. We turn out as tippy as eggs. Legs are an illusion. We are held as in a carton if someone loves us. It's a pity only loss proves this. And I will end with what I consider a highly optimistic poem in a kind of an abstract sense. This is called Why Explain the Precise by Way of the Less Precise, which is kind of a irritable question posed by the biographer of a man who wrote Physics in Whitehead. Why explain the precise by way of the less precise? Okay, I'm going to answer that. Oh, I have to tell you, this has the word nap in it, which doesn't mean to sleep. It means it's a thing that you do to arrowheads, right? Right? Yeah, okay. It doesn't seem right to think blunt blows could do a thing like that. But we do know arrowheads are napped with rocks. So maybe it is possible that some kind of edge could result from generalized impacts or large blasts. A mind grows somehow more exact. Thank you.
I'm regretting my own protocol, so I'm just here quickly to say, please help me welcome the Poet Laureate of the United States, Juan Felipe Herrera.
gracias. Thank you. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Campbell and Kay. Amazing. So beautiful to be here. Thank you so much, everybody. I want to say thank you for inviting me, for inviting us, and for doing a great book festival here in Miami, Florida. A big old mano for everybody here. Big old mano, big old hand. How beautiful it is. And thanks again, really. There's a lot of beautiful culture here and a lot of stories here, a lot of poetry, mucha música. I was talking to the taxi driver, Nicolás, who was asked him about a güirero. I said, what's a güirero? I really wanted to know the life of a güiro player, on a gourd or on or whatever it is that makes those beautiful, beautiful beats and beautiful sounds. It makes it spicy and salty and peppery when you use a güiro in a piece, and maracas, of course. But he said, no, I'm talking about güira. I said, what's a güira? Well, güira is made out of steel or metal. That's a metal güiro, and the güiro is made out of gourd, and the güira is made out of steel. And so I learned a lot in taxis, and I'm so glad I learned a lot about the güira and the güiro and the music. I want to learn more music, much more. Thanks again. This is a piece from Notes on the Assemblage. And, people talk about migration, migrants, migrantes, and it's, the word is kind of falling apart because we're all migrating. When bombs are blowing and bullets are flying, we're all scrambling, and we're all moving without really knowing if we're going to make it, and without really knowing where to go. And we're surprised at every moment. It's very big, as you know, incredible, undescribable phenomenon that's taking place, whether it's in a restaurant, or whether it's in a city, or whether it's between countries. So the term migrant, in a sense, is receding, even though that's not talked about. And perhaps that's why it's a good thing to reflect on this condition, on this human condition, being blown out of where you lived and where your life used to be, your family, everything about you, and all of a sudden you're in this trail, this broken trail, with no end in sight, and hopefully you'll find a place. And sometimes people do not want you to come in. This is called Border Bus, and it talks about this. In this case, it's a voice of two women who have already been detained, and they're in the bus, and the bus is not wanted to enter the site where the detention center is. So I can't imagine a more terrible situation. And it's in Spanish and English, all together, weaving in, weaving out. Called Border Bus. ¿A dónde vamos? Where are we going? Speak in English or the guard is going to come. ¿A dónde vamos? Where are we going? Speak in English or the guard is going to get us, hermana. Pero ¿qué hicimos? But what did we do? Speak in English, come on. No más unas pocas palabras. I just know a few words. You better figure it out, hermana. The guard is right there. You see the bus driver? Tantos días y ni sabíamos para dónde íbamos. So many days and we didn't even know where we were headed. I know where we're going, where we always go, to some detention center, to some fingerprinting hall or cube, some warehouse after warehouse. Pero ya nos investigaron, ya cruzamos y ya nos cacharon los federales del bordo. ¿Qué más quieren? But they already questioned us. We already crossed over. They already grabbed us, the Border Patrol. And what more do they want? We were all on the bus now. That is all. ¿A dónde vamos? Te digo, salí desde Honduras, no hemos comido nada y ¿dónde vamos a dormir? Where are we going? I'm telling you, I came from Honduras. We haven't eaten anything. And where are we going to sleep? I don't want to talk about it. Just tell them that you came from nowhere. I came from nowhere. And we crossed the border from nowhere. And now you and me and everybody else here is on a bus to nowhere. You got it? Pero por eso nos venimos, para salir de la nada. But that's why we came, to leave all that nothing behind. When the bus stops, there will be more nothing. We're here, hermana. Y esas gentes, ¿quiénes son? No quieren que siga el camión, no quieren que sigamos, están bloqueando el bus. ¿A dónde vamos ahora? Those people, who are they? They don't want the bus to keep going. They don't want us to keep going. Now they're blocking the bus. So what do we do? What? He tardado 47 días para llegar acá. No fue fácil, hermana. 45 días desde Honduras con los coyotes. Los que bueno, ya sabes, los que les hicieron a las chicas ahí mero, ya sabes lo que hicieron enfrente de nosotros. Pero ¿qué íbamos a hacer? Y los trenes, ¿cómo diré, hermana? Cientos de nosotros como gallinas, como topos en jaulas y verduras pudriéndose en los trenes de miles. ¿Me oyes? De miles. Y se resbalaban de los techos y los desiertos de Arizona, de Texas. Sed y hambre, dos cosas. Sed y hambre día tras día, hermana. Y ahora aquí en este camión, y quién sabe a dónde vamos, hermana. Fíjate, vengo desde Brownsville, donde nos amarraron, y ahora en California, pero todavía no entramos y todavía el bordo está por delante. It took me 47 days to get here. It wasn't easy, hermana. 45 days from Honduras. With the coyotes, the ones that, well, you know what they did to las chicas right there in front of us. So, what we were supposed to do, what were we supposed to do? And the trains, how can I tell you, hermana? Hundreds of us like chickens, like gophers in cages and vegetables, nothing, rotting on trains of thousands. You hear me? Thousands. And they did, and they slid from the rooftops in the deserts of Arizona and Texas. Thirst and hunger. Thirst and hunger. Two things. Thirst and hunger. Day after day, hermana. And now here I come. And now here on this bus of who knows where we're going, hermana. Listen, I come from Brownsville, where they tied us up, and now in California, but still, we're not inside, and still the border lies ahead of us. I told you to speak in English, even un poquito. The guard is going to think we are doing something. People are screaming outside. They want to push the bus back. Pero ¿para dónde le damos, hermana? Por eso me vine, le quebraron las piernas a mi padre, las pandillas mataron a mi hijo. Solo quiero que estemos juntos. Tantos años, hermana, separados. But where do we go, hermana? That's why I'm here. They broke my father's legs. Gangs killed my son. I just want to be together. Us, so many years, hermana, pulled apart. What? Mi madre me dijo que lo más importante es la libertad, la bondad y las buenas acciones con el prójimo. My mother told me that the most important thing is freedom, kindness, and doing good for others. What are you talking about? I told you to be quiet. La libertad viene desde muy adentro. Ahí reside todo el dolor de todo el mundo. El momento en que purguemos ese dolor de nuestras entrañas, seremos libres. Y en ese momento tenemos que llenarnos de todo el dolor de todos los seres para liberarlos a ellos mismos. Freedom comes from deep inside. All the pain of the world lives there. The second we cleanse that pain from our guts, we shall be free. And in that moment, we have to fill ourselves up with all the pains of all beings to free them, all of them. The guard is coming. Well, now what? Maybe they'll take us to another detention center. We'll eat. We'll have a floor, a blanket, toilets, water, and each other for a while. No somos nada. Y venimos de la nada. Pero esa nada lo es todo si la nutres de amor. Por eso venceremos. We are nothing and we come from nothing, but that nothing is everything if you feed it with love. And that is why we're going to triumph. We are everything, hermana, because we come from everything. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And if the man with a chokehold, pulls the standing man down, why does he live? And if the dead man is gone, why does he rise? And why is there a clicking sound, the sound the soul makes when it leaves, even though no one knows? And if the woman stays, why is she the crucible, the fire? Why is she the voice? And if the voice is never heard, why does it resound for 9 generations? Even if it was a teen with a swagger, why is he still prone? If the police were right and the court was in agreement and the governor spoke humble, facing the masses, why are they lost in the infinite desert? And if the looters broke the wall and split the wine, why are they still scorched with thirst? And if we march, why does the street divide as we pass by? And why does it not offer us here? Take my water. And if all the laws are freedom for you, for me, why do we not speak? And if that tree stands behind you green, with its last 2 limbs up swollen with blood, why does it not suffer? Why does it blossom torches? This is from my first book. And let me tell you, it was so much fun to write this book because we're just coming out all burly and nectary and tie-dyed out and filled with Aztec words and trying to unite all the nations and put all Latin America together back again like Humpty Dumpty Latina. And this is what the poem sounded like. And with a lot of long hair and a big guitar. This is what they sounded like. And I'm going to choose one that's back here. There's no titles here because, we were just coming out of things and titles got in the way. And there's no page numbers because page numbers slowed us down. Besides, you don't really want to read the page number, right, when you're reading the poem. So why have it there anyway? It's too much ink. And the printer was given a special deal on the book. Which is this one. People say, how come you're using invitation paper? And merienda was a term we wanted to use for all of Latin America united. We wanted to unite Latin America, all of it, into one nation called Amerindia. Amerindia, one heart, una tierra, one earth, roja, red, burning rain, jewel rising, winging song, weaving light, pueblos chanting Amerindia, blazing acres, soles and suns and rebosoles and reboso shawls and laborando and working quetzal, sacred bird, maíz, corn, goza, joy, rise, cuerpo desnudo, nude and naked, our bodies sudando and sweating, roja, red, Shakira, bead, blaze, beads, blossom, spiral heart. Pueblos sin fronteras, cities without borders, peoples without borders, seres and spirits without borders, histories without borders, parching, milpas fall, the earth will churn, rise, the red dawn of blazing, heart of raza, one people, Amerindia, celestial earth and song, rings our blood, pulsando, pulsating, drumming, one purpose, one path, sembrando, sowing and weaving, reap the soul, take up the sun, ahora sol, now sun, kupuri sol, spirit sun, amerindia, sun, sol, frondoso, flowering, corazón, raíz, root, ardiente, burning, to one heart. Rise, people, rise, raza. La primavera to flow, let the spring flow and churn our destiny, cultivando, cultivating, laborando, working, one heart, one nation, one heart, one cosmos, to never fall, to always rise in our heart, in our land, in our struggle. Amerindia. Amerindia. Thank you so much.
Now let's see how our technology is doing. Wow, these guys are doing a great job. How about you guys? Are your microphones?
Let's see. Is it on? Yeah.
Yes? Oh, great. I know that both of our poets laureate really want to talk to the audience and hear what you guys have to ask them. I think if you have a question and you go to that microphone, it'll be easiest. But so think about that. And in the meantime, I'll start off with a question I have. Anytime I encounter the word even poet laureate, I'm reminded of Shelley's famous thought from the Romantic era that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. And you guys have both now been in D.C. up there where
Legislating.
legislating. I mean, where the poet laureate's office is actually in the Library of Congress, right on Capitol Hill, right next to the Supreme Court. And so you've been there and you've seen the legislator. And I wonder what, if not Shelley's grandiose vision, what do you see the role of poetry in the public sphere in the United States as?
Why don't you take that one?
Well, the role of the poet in the public sphere is exactly what we're doing here, It's exactly what we're doing here, bringing our poems that also include so many things, what Kay was reading and her reflections, and what we perceive and all our words, and Campbell and you see. That's the role, to bring the poem as far out as possible and to include the voices and lives and communities of the people.
That's the kind of thing a sitting laureate says. That was great. Yeah.
Do you think, Juan, that the poetry would have a different public role in Amerindia, in your, imagined or utopian kind of Latin community?
Well, that moment was a moment of solidarity, and we still need solidarity. And solidarity is just simply when we all come together and really tell our truths, our stories, our lives, and we listen to them and include them, not separate them, not segregate them, and not hide them, not shame them, not bury them, not ignore them, not deny them, not ridicule them. That's what it is about.
And I see that's Jonathan. You have a question, Jonathan?
Campbell, Kay, and Juan, I loved your poetry. And Juan, when you read that poem, I'm an immigration lawyer, and I've heard that story many times. And that's so moving because it tells the story of the immigrants. Now there's so many problems with 31 Republican states saying no Syrian refugees here. And that's a big problem. And it seems that the Republicans are very anti-immigrant, and all the immigration lawyers and everyone else who is in favor of immigration gets a bad
rap.
Yeah. It looks, and so many Republicans and the Fox News people using immigrant and criminal in the same sentence. So I really admire, and I agree, Campbell, poets are the legislator of the world, like Shelley said.
Well, I was quoting Shelley. That was not
I
my
know,
own
but-
personal assertion of belief. But it's an interesting utopian
Sure.
thought. But you're commending Juan for the poem, which I agree entirely. Did you want to ask a more specific
Exactly.
question, Jonathan?
No,
No. Okay.
just a
So
comment.
that's fine. I'm just checking to make sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Here's another question.
Thank you very much for the poems. Juan Felipe, you teach in your poem both languages, I mean English and Spanish. I mean, you have the poem essentially translated. It's a very interesting, I'm wondering whether you want us to develop a new language where we have both in the same poem, or whether you could let the poem be in one or the other. And also, just in your role as poet laureate, whether and sort of this multiplicity, the multiple languages of this country, how do we recognize them as American languages? I mean, not just English and Spanish, but all the other languages spoken here, and whether poetry has a function in that education of that recognition of that multiplicity. But very specifically, whether you think the poem should always be in both English and Spanish, so that the English-only reader can understand the poem, just not reading the Spanish parts, or whether you think that at some point we can just write in both English and Spanish and let it be at that.
Well, thank you. Well, we all actually speak many languages and use many musics to express ourselves. Home language, official language, interview language when we go get interviews, and with our friends, and when we get all poetic, and when we're hanging out. Well, there's a lot of musics and ways of speaking and speech, and of course there's languages. Let's let them all flow. Let's let them all flow. Let us take the fetters off as much as possible. There's just too many fetters, fettering around. And it's good to be free. That's what it's all about. Poetry is a free space, a free zone. And it's like just an encouragement. Poetry is an encouragement for all of us to free up, especially languages, because when we choke a language, we're choking a people. When we choke a language, we're choking an entire people, an entire history and histories and herstories. We're just choking them. And so when we free up, even if it's just one word from another language, even if you don't speak that language, just get that word and put it in there. Free it up a little bit. Give it a little milk. Give it a little milk, a little water. And it's a good thing. Let's free up our languages and free up our peoples by using as much language and language art as possible.
It's not easy to do, though, Juan, and you did a wonderful job, because both of the languages, as the questioner said, were really kind of simultaneously present, but in a way that made it clear the poem was functioning in both English, Spanish, and the kind of confluence of the two.
That's true.
It's a really hard trick to pull off, and I think you did a wonderful job. Another question.
Thank you.
Hi, I really enjoyed both of the wittiness of both of the poets. But on the same lines about multilingual, I am a mother, as many other mothers here in the United States that are raising kids that are multilingual, who actually speak Spanglish. And it's very, I really appreciate what you're doing, Mr. Herrera, because I know you're also working in creating books for these children who are overseen. We struggle a lot trying to find books of quality in Spanish here in the United States. I live here in South Florida, and I come every year with my kids just to get the chance to get like good quality books in Spanish for them to practice their skills in Spanish. And I just wonder, like, what is happening? Like, here we are in a nation that many people speak other languages, and I don't see it as a handicap. I actually see it as a wonderful opportunity for many people to raise their kids multilingual, not only in Spanish. We can, teach them many languages. I wonder if, is there any initiative which we can maybe support? And I know, like, I'm not the only one. We're trying to kind of like really support more literature in languages, in other languages. Thank you so much.
Yeah, do you know anything about that one? A specific initiative or that would be applicable?
Well, there's Dia de los Niños, Day of the Children, and Pat Mora is one of the great promoters of that. She's also a children's book writer, Pat Mora, M-O-R-A, Pat Mora, and she does Dia de los Niños, Day of the Children, bilingual books, and it's a national program, but it's not necessarily in every city, so we have to call on Pat and promote it in our local community. Dia de los Niños, Day of the Children, is one way to go about it. And also remember that you are the initiative. Everyone here is the initiative. So if you feel that that's important in your own life right now, and you feel it's a good cause to open up the doors for children's books and multilingual children's books, if you believe in that and feel it and can sense it right now, then get yourselves going. Find ways, create a small group, and you know how good you guys are. You guys are fabulous. I know you do a lot of things already. And so you are the initiative. And of course, Pat Mora, and she can also look up Dia de los Niños, and you'll find ways to continue that project.
And events like this book fair, which has an entire, obviously, Spanish language, which you already know because you're bringing your kids to get books in both English and Spanish. Yeah, question.
Yes, good afternoon. We have an amazing opportunity here. We have a current poet laureate and a former poet laureate. And my question is concerning the position itself. You are officially representing the United States government. And I was wondering how being a poet laureate who represents the U.S. government either constrains you as a poet or liberates you as a poet. And I like this as an interesting case study because we have one who is currently constrained within the political position and one who is former, where I believe she has more freedom to discuss some of the pros and cons to being a poet laureate. I noticed some sarcasm in some of her comments earlier about being in the position. I'm actually want her to explore that. This is a very, because certainly if you guys say this liberates you, but you write something that's very offensive to American general, you will be under a lot of political pressure, and you'll be called to step down, or you might lose your credibility. I was wondering how that, having the role and the burden of representing the government and being a representative of the government that does all the things that it does.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I know that these guys have strong feelings.
Juan and I were actually talking about that a little bit. When I was invited to be the poet laureate, George Bush was the president. And I was very reluctant to say yes to the position because I thought, I don't want any part in this government. And I had to think that over. And what I decided, first of all, it is not a government position. I mean, it is, you are paid not by the president or not by a political party or anything like that. You are an agent of the Library of Congress. Your check comes from the Library of Congress. Your office is in the Library of Congress, and it is not one political party or another, and it doesn't represent the presidency. Thank God. But I also I thought about it, and I thought, is it a good thing to be dissuaded from accepting a position, for advocating for poetry, for representing poetry, for embodying poetry, because of political oppression, because of distaste in that way? And I thought really it would have sort of been letting them win to not take the position, and that it was an act of freedom and assertion and the power of poetry to go ahead and to do it and to be as free as I was. And being as free as I was, although you did call me sarcastic, was to be the eccentric person that I am, and to embody the fact that, you know what, poets are only who they are. They can't become some artificial person or some ambassador exclusively. They are these strange people who stayed home a lot and wrote, and now find themselves in this weirdly public position.
Yeah. Yes, sir. That's well said. Extremely well said. That's well said. And it's a great question. For me, it's putting. I agree with Kay, and my focus is stepping aside from my biases. My focus is stepping aside from my biases, and kind of crackling into a new self, because I really have. I'm changing as I move along, because I'm in more communities, and I'm listening to more stories. Young people come up to me and ask me about what shall I do with my manuscript. Young Latinas ask me, I feel some microaggressions on this campus, and can you help me? And on and on. Or simply, this is my poetry book. This is what I'm doing. Or I meet young teachers are totally ecstatic. They're just great, raring to go. They just love teaching, and I meet them, and they just pour all this shovels of inspiration on me. I go, oh, she's just so inspired. She's a brand new teacher, and she wants to just, work with her students. And I go, oh, right, I'm inspired. I'm ready to go to the next place. But it's about putting aside my biases and my old selves, and being open. It's challenging. It's very challenging, but it's a good challenge. It's a challenge I want to face.
Did either of you ever feel, I think part of the question implied that there was a kind of official constraint in the job. Did you feel constrained in your writing or your ability to represent literature?
I think one of the things that happens is it really takes your time. You are distracted from writing, and I think for the period of time that you're the laureate, you're pretty much busy hoofing it around. And the one thing I felt was, I think Juan and I are very different in this. Juan is much more socially engaged than I ever was. And I never particularly thought, and I'm kind of the poster child for poetry not being a helping profession. I don't think of it as a helping profession. And therefore I sort of embodied that. And there is a certain amount of pressure exerted by the Library of Congress, or for the Librarian of Congress, to have a project, to do something socially useful. And I'm very concerned about this confusion of social usefulness and poetry. I don't think it's inevitable. I don't think it's an automatic thing. I think it can be, but it absolutely doesn't need to be. It doesn't have to be. So that's kind of an answer.
Well, the shoulds are always a problem, so you're right. But for me, it's growing up as a farm worker child, and across California, being kind of shut down in many ways, and kind of just gaining all that steam and combustion for years and years and years. I just had to come on out sooner or later. And I also noticed that many others wanted to speak also. So then my poetry became, because of my generation, became a vehicle for them and for you, and also for me. It's a circle. It's not this or that. And but I love poetry in all its aspects, in its private aspects, experimental aspects, its public aspects, and its roaring, rugged, bohemian, tie-dyed out aspects.
Another question. I'm sorry to keep you waiting there.
So a comment and a question. First, to pick up on the prior comment, the poem about the migrants is so beautiful, not only because it seems to me comes very naturally from you, but in the dialogue between the two, it expresses something which one doesn't see often at all. In the news, there's statistics, and even when a journalist interviews somebody, it's a question and an answer, perhaps, whereas you're getting inside. And so in a very unique way, I think, you give voice to something that's hugely important to be given voice to, even though it seems to me that you weren't intending to be socially useful. But it fulfills both those things beautifully and importantly, I think. And I have a question for Kay, if I may. There's so much wonderful humor in each of your poems. I sort of want to get a little more of that by asking something like, in what other ways in your life, other than the poetry, the humor finds expression, or if for some reason you couldn't have been a poet, what other forms might your personality, as so beautifully expressed in the humor, have taken or come out as?
Well, thank you for that. You know, when I was starting to write poetry, I felt constrained by the fact that humor really wasn't seen as a legitimate sort of form of poetry at the time. There was no rhyme and there was no humor. And I was very interested in sounds and humor and wit. I mean wit in the larger sense of, you know, the gray cells. I was reluctant to be a poet because I didn't think that I could find a way to write that had a prayer of success. I actually would have liked to have been a stand-up comedian, but I didn't really have the character for it. I mean, I'm not public enough, so it really wouldn't have suited me. But there is that in me.
I think we have one more question.
Good afternoon, and thank you. This is a two-pronged question. My first question is how you were introduced to poetry. What were your introductions to poetry? And second, this is a concern as an educator. There's a crisis in some, maybe all, public school systems across the U.S. Some schools don't have a fully equipped school library or one at all. And that's not to say that the teachers aren't using quality literature in the classroom, but perhaps some teachers, K through 12, don't teach poetry at all. And so I'm wondering how students, in their primary years, maybe some even in their high school years, I'm hoping they're being introduced to poetry at that time, are being introduced to poetry. So perhaps for part 2, you might share some of your strategies as to how, and this might be some grandiose vision that you have, of how young people can be introduced to poetry. So first, your introductions, and secondly, what we might do. Educators and families have their own role in the home, and that's another issue, literacy in the home, about how we can get poetry to the people.
You're absolutely right that poetry has been extremely drastically reduced in the standard curriculum in public schools steadily over the last 100 years. Robert Pinsky has an essay about just how radical the diminishment of poetry as it's been taught in the public school system is. But anyway, let me put it to our 2 poet laureates, what your own kind of genesis as a poet, or how poetry maybe entered your life, and then what are some thoughts how to keep it vibrant with especially kids who may not get exposure to it?
You know, I'll answer briefly. I had almost no exposure to poetry as a child. And I don't feel dismal about these things. I think there are appetites in us and sensitivities. There is in us something that wants something, and it keeps seeking for it till it finds it. And you don't have to necessarily be presented with it as a child. I mean, of course, it would be vastly superior if we were rained with poetry. But I think that a certain kind of mind will have to have it, and will find it, and will always seek it. I mean, like in my childhood, I just liked the way people used language. I was always listening for the word that I hadn't heard. Or the strange expression, I remember a student said, or I was a kid and somebody said, you don't have to broadcast it. And I thought, oh my God, what a beautiful thing to say. You don't have to broadcast it. I was a loudmouth apparently. But I think I think that the sensitive mind acquires language, acquires a great trove of potential. And it doesn't frighten me that things aren't perhaps at one moment or another not going well.
And do you believe that crosses all economic boundaries, all types of demographics?
Do I think that's happening everywhere?
Yes, that you're saying that the mind wants to
Oh,
acquire this
yeah. I mean,
language.
I think it's so unpredictable, particularly in community colleges, which is where I spent my lifetime teaching remedial English. You absolutely don't know who's where. I mean, such promise, such surprises come out of the most unlikely places. And poets are always coming from weird spots. They never come from where they're supposed to, and they usually have a story of not having been particularly encouraged.
That makes a lot of sense. I can definitely relate to that. You know, I never even took a poetry class, you know, until I was in the workshop later on. But that was a workshop, and I didn't even know what that was.
Yeah.
I just kind of, there I was all of a sudden. But you said you liked the word broadcast, and that's how it works. You know, I like to do a lot of, with middle schoolers and high schoolers, I like to do, I've used a million phrases for it. But it's something like a word-a-thon or a conversation-thon. So, because, you know, it's hard to get the words out. It's kind of, okay, well, what am I going to write? You know, like, what, therefore, you know, how do I start, you know? So I'll create 2 lines of students with little pieces of paper and a pencil, and the line in the middle that everybody has to walk slowly through till they get to the other side and then join the lines. And as they walk through all the external lines, the 2 very tight lines, it's the shoulder-to-shoulder lines. You're walking through those like a tunnel, like a gauntlet. And everybody's having a conversation with everybody else. Like, if I'm facing you on the line, hey, how you doing? Wow, amazing. Can you believe that reading? I couldn't believe it. You know what happened? Well, I don't know. It was like orange and red and blue and wild. And then, but everybody's doing that, and the person who's walking by is just listening and taking words that they like and adding words that come to them as they note these words that they like while they're moving. So I think physical movement, word-a-thon, or just a lot of conversation flying across through the brains and ears of the young peoples, and they're taking them down, because it's okay, you can take them down, and then add your own words, and everybody does it, everybody completes it, everybody's successful, and then when they read them, they're wild poems, and there's no failure in that project. I also want to do that with sports. So as they're kicking the soccer ball, they're yelling out words and picking up words. So we have movement in games and language. And also, when I was in New York City, I noticed these three young children, like, you know, they were like really doing homework very seriously with their headphones on. And I said, oh yeah, music. You got to have music just flashing through your brain now these days. This generation, music flashes through your brain. So while you do things. So I would recommend put on headphones and write. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I tried it the other day. It was fabulous. So those are ideas for you. $1.
Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel for a delightful conversation. We have another session beginning at 5 o'clock. We ask that you please exit to the left. Thank you.